Hello and welcome again. Today I'm very pleased to be speaking to clinical psychologist Dr. Romi Ran, who shares techniques she has used in her clinic and developed working with people challenged with food, eating and body image. She has a new book out called Bite Size Peace, which is a guide designed to help readers nurture a healthier relationship with their body and food, and teaches them how to apply these concepts to all aspects of their life. So welcome, Romi. I've got my A's and my O's completely muddled up.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
So would you like to tell everyone just a little bit about your background? And I haven't asked you, just because I'm so nosy, I'm very interested to know how you, our members won't know this, but you're actually sitting out in California, I believe. So
I am.
how did you move from the UK to California, and what's your background?
Okay, well, just to say, you can't see it, but it's not sunny. It's one of the rare days that it's not sunny in California right now. So the windows, the blinds are all down. So I grew up and trained in the UK as a clinical psychologist. I finished my training, oh gosh, well over a decade ago now. And for many years, I was in private practice. I did do some NHS work, but I was mostly in private practice post-training in the UK. With a range of things. So my specialism has always been food, eating and body image, but I see people for all different mental health difficulties, well-being, life coaching, the whole kind of mixed bag of different presentations. But at a certain point, you have to practice what you preach. And, I think that whilst you can't ever run away from, your own internal experience, and that's very much a reflection of what happens outside for you. At the same time, there are certain environments and places that I think suit particular people more. And so despite growing up in the UK, my family's originally South African, and I think I'm just a sunshine and coast and beach girl at heart. And so I sort of had this idea that would be the type of life that I would love to live. Luckily, my husband was on the same page, and my kids. And we made the move very much as a lifestyle decision. It was actually kind of risky from a professional perspective because I had to move everything to be online before COVID. And so I only work online now. I work with people from all over the world. So it was a really positive move for me, but I didn't know that that's how it would be. But I just, it felt really important. It felt important to be authentic to myself. All of my work is really based on creating a very, very clear and intimate understanding of who each person, our own personal expression really, and who we are. And so when you start to discover that, it can be very difficult to then stay in environments that no longer support that. And so that was the main driving force for moving over to California.
Oh, well, obviously we've got a time difference here, and it's dark and it's miserable here, frankly. But apart from that, so we've got some questions that we're going to discuss, and I'm really looking forward to hearing the answer, because I think most people will be intrigued of the questions and relate to those. But the one thing that I wanted to say about your book, and I always say I find whenever I speak to someone, I say, oh, your book, it's just very interesting, and I think people must be very bored of me, but I do find them all very interesting. I don't know if that's because they've been selected so well, the ones that I do decide to highlight. But the one thing that I liked about your book was, although there's quite a lot of pages, it was very easy to read, and it was short and punchy, and was very clear of, this is what you're going to talk about. Here's a really practical case study for people to relate, to understand exactly what you were talking about, and then sort of doing, here's some sort of fun facts behind it, and then you go on to the practical exercise. And I think that so many books I read don't put in those exercises. And I think those exercises make you really think. And that really, to me, is a proper guide. And I know your book is a guide, and that's how it makes it a sort of manual stroke guide to make you do the work.
Thank you. Yes, that was absolutely the intention behind it. So there were two kind of driving forces. Definitely the bite-sized kind of pieces and short chapters and trying to break things up. Many years ago, I had a teacher who said, a real intelligence is actually the ability to explain quite complex ideas in a way that almost anyone could understand. And I definitely don't consider myself as an intellect, but that was the goal. The goal was really to try and make it accessible to a whole variety of ages, of backgrounds, of understanding, so that it would be really, really accessible. And that sort of leads into the second driving force, or the aspect of it being more of a toolkit or a guide. I'm one person. I can only fit in so many people in my day that I can meet with. There is a cost involved, so that already prohibits some people. And so I really wanted to have something that was out there that would give people the opportunity who, let's say, couldn't come to meet with me personally for whatever reason. They could take, these are the practices that I'm working with my clients one-to-one with, and I haven't really held anything back. Yes, you get a bit more of the back and forth when you're doing it in session, and you get to kind of follow through, but in terms of this is what you need in order to really transform your relationship with food and eating, it's all in there. And that was really the intention. I wanted something that anyone could pick up, and should they have that kind of desire to want to transform their relationship, whether it's with food, eating, how they view their bodies, or even their life in general, that it was really clear and it was laid out in that way. So I'm thankful for the feedback, and I'm glad that intention was met.
No, 100%. You've got a tick in the box there for me. So going on to sort of some of them, and the questions that we've picked out are ones that I know that you are asked quite often because they're the most common and it's what people think. So, what are the signs of an unhealthy relationship with food and body image? Because I'm sure that some of us don't necessarily recognize that we have one of those.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Can I share a personal example for a moment? So the way I first got into this, and I do touch upon this in the book, but the way I first got into this was I was already interested in eating disorders, but it was from a place of naivety, actually. I haven't had an eating disorder, and so I was interested in what is the driving force as to why someone would either restrict, make themselves sick after eating, to excess, all of those different. I was really intrigued by what leads people to engage in different behaviors. And at that point, it was very much, and this was pre-training, this was going back nearly 20 years. It was very much a naive position of separation. I'm over here, I have my experience, and there are a group of people, over there, and that's their experience. And then I was with a friend when I was doing some research in Boston, and we were talking, and she said, "Oh, can we go into this ice cream store?" And she said she orders this big tub of, I remember it was raspberry and mint swirl ice cream, but she ordered like the family size one. And she's very tall, very slender, very attractive woman. And she gets this huge tub, and I'm finding this all quite fascinating. And she takes a spoon and she takes a big bite, and delicious. And then she does another one. And then she puts the lid on this tub and she puts it away. And I looked at her and I was like, "That's it?" And she said, "Yes, I just eat what I want and I stop when I've had enough." And that was, that just throwaway comment was completely transformative to me, because what I started to see was that my whole view of them out there and me over here, it doesn't really exist that way. I had never thought about eating what I want and stopping when I've had enough. I was still eating based on, well, a lot of the time habit pattern, conditioned ideals, what I had been told, clock time. I never really knew what something like enough was when it came to things like ice cream. Ice cream was something that shouldn't eat too much of, and if I did, it was them. I mean, there might not have been, sometimes there was guilt, sometimes there was shame, sometimes there was feeling that there was too much, but there was definitely an element of control. And so when we talk about this unhealthy relationship with food, it's really around not, it's about not being able to listen to our own bodies to determine what, when, and how to eat. It's really around taking the advice from other people, from what we've heard, from all the kind of everything that comes in, all this information that's bombarding us, and using that to determine what, when, and how we eat. Looking at clock time, going by our schedules and not honoring ourselves, and not honoring when we do need to nourish ourselves. And so that's really the sort of stepping stone, trying to recognize, do I have a healthy relationship with food? Am I aware of the reasons why I eat, or what driving me to choose certain foods, or why I just always end up having something sweet at the end of a meal? And it's about cultivating that awareness to start to develop that interest in exploring our driving forces around what, when, and how we eat. So it's really about trying to understand and to develop this intimate feedback that our bodies can give us. And that's what a healthy relationship with food looks like. And when we're disconnected from that, that's very much an unhealthy relationship, one that's built often on obsession, on trying to fit into ideals, on listening to other people's advice and not being in tune with ourselves.
So the flip side of that is, well, what's being at ease with food? What does that look like, feel like? And I suppose I was going to say, how can we achieve it? But we may not realize until we've gone through that process and asked ourselves the question, are we restricted by how we eat? We may not know actually how to be at ease.
And I think absolutely. And I think, again, I once did a workshop, and I shared a kind of common phrase that is sort of thrown around in this network, which is that someone with a healthy relationship with food is, mostly not thinking about food unless they're eating it, which means, yes, with the prep and what they want, they might think about it, but when they're eating it, they're connected to it. And someone with an unhealthy relationship with food is hardly ever thinking about what they're eating. They're not connecting with that process, but they're completely obsessed with what, when, and how they're going to eat, how they're going to get that food. And so it's really about like seeing that. Are you recognizing that you're constantly thinking about food? And I had someone come up at the end of that workshop, and she said, I've never thought about it that way. I'm always thinking about what I'm going to eat. I'm always thinking about what I should be eating or what I should be avoiding. But the moment I sit down to eat, I'm just rushing through it. I'm disconnected from that experience. So, the being at ease with food it's a felt experience. It's not really something that can be, it's kind of like knowing when you need to go to the toilet. You just sort of know it. It's if I said to you, but you should only go at these times and you should do exactly what I tell you to at those times, you'd probably think I was crazy.
So I know what would happen. I'd be thinking, I need to go to the loo now. That would be the problem.
Yeah, you might be thinking that, and that's exactly what happens. So the moment we stop listening to ourselves and we start going by what other people have told us to, or what we think we should be doing, that's when we run into issues. And so being at ease with food, I have a vignette in my book. I have two, and one's called fear-based eating and the other's called love-based eating. And it's a whole like free and very like peaceful knowingness of how to eat. You walk through your days, they might look quite similar. You wouldn't know as an observer who's got a fearful relationship with food and who's got a love-based relationship, but the expression internally is very, very clear. you know, I might sit down, I wake up in the morning and I think, what do I want? You know, what am I hungry for? Do I just want coffee or tea? Sometimes that's all I want. Sometimes I want a full-blown breakfast. Sometimes I don't want anything at all. Ease with food is being able to navigate whatever comes up in the moment and being able to react to that in a way that is very, very loving and very nurturing to the body and to the mind and the emotions. And it's very sweet. You know it. And the way that you'll know it is if you start to transform, you'll see that there is a completely different quality to the experience of eating. So if you're not sure, the advice is to start to, you know, and I'll talk about what the principles are in a minute, but to start to work with listening to your hunger, with eating mindfully, with all the different things that I speak about and that are kind of taught in the book. But really, you'll notice how different that experience is if you've had quite a difficult relationship with food beforehand, even if you've not been aware of it. You'll see the whole experience is completely different.
And I think also a lot of it does come in, which you alluded to earlier, is, you know, how you're brought up. And you and I will probably, well, there's definitely a big age difference between us, but it will be interesting, and you must see it based on people's ages. So I was brought up by parents who had gone through the war, which meant they had rations, which meant that you had to eat. You ate at certain times and you had to finish your plate, whatever it was.
We
And
call that the clean plate club.
yeah, and it's hard to break that.
It is. So it is hard to break that because the habit patterns are strong. What the book shows you and what I kind of preach is that it's hard because you have been conditioned that way, not because it's actually hard. You know, if that makes sense, it's almost as simple as just changing your view, which is one of the hardest things to do. So I don't want to invalidate the experience. I mean, you know, this is my whole career really is supporting this, but I also don't want to catastrophize the situation so that people feel that, oh, I'll never be able, you know, I've been doing this for 60 years of my life, I'll never be able to change. Once you gain that awareness, once you develop that and you see, oh, like me with the ice cream, you know, I just eat what I want and I stop when I've had enough. Once you see, oh, I don't have to finish all the food on my plate. I have been conditioned to do that. And there doesn't have to be anger. There doesn't have to be a sense of injustice. Why was I taught that? Or why didn't my parents know? There can be compassion and understanding and compassion for yourself. Well, yeah, I've spent 60 years of my life just finishing everything on my plate because that's what I was taught to do. And the moment you see that, it starts to lose its power. It doesn't mean overnight things will necessarily just change, but you can start to work on really being comfortable bit by bit. You know, you just leave a little piece at the end, you know, purposely every single meal, just start to get more comfortable, get more at ease with throwing food away. I know with that, for that generation, that was a really, really difficult thing to do. And so it's really about unlearning it. That's everything in that I talk about. Everything that's in the book is a process of unlearning, of seeing all where we've developed these habit patterns and these conditionings, and then start to unlearn them. And just as they were developed, so new patterns, more wholesome, more value-based patterns can be relearned.
So I can see that what you're doing is, first of all, bringing awareness to people to be aware, and then almost, and you haven't used the word, but I just want, it's almost like giving people permission that, you know, that they are allowed to not eat it.
They're allowed to not eat it and they are allowed to eat it because, you know, depending on your presentation, it's both. Yes, it's really about learning to be it's an empowerment. Actually, it's empowering you to learn how to say, no, this is not going to serve me well, or yes, this is what I need to nourish myself. And absolutely a permission. And I've had many clients, you know, through tears basically say, I like, this finally feels like I'm getting permission to eat. Actually, it tends to be more that side of things. Finally someone is allowing me to eat something and saying that that's okay.
And a lot of those things we don't recognise that we've got there, locked up there, as this is what it is. But sort of moving on to there and having influences. I mean, now obviously the big influence are things online. you know, we are bombarded all over the place by this is good for us and this is good for us, and you know, and it's hard to know what is good for us. What do we take? What do we take from our past? What do we take from what we've learned? So how do you distinguish what's internally you think is good and what externally is being pushed at you?
Of course, I am a huge support of any kind of evidence base. You know, that is that our entire profession is of clinical psychology is based on evidence-based and scientific research. And at the same time, without dismissing that, I still hold a view when I'm working one-to-one with people, or when I'm talking, you know, if I'm presenting or speaking on this topic, you are your own expert. No one else knows your body the way that you know it. No one else can actually tell you what will serve you well. So by cultivating as I use the word intimacy, because I don't feel that that is really the word. It's this very, very deep knowingness that your body, this natural wisdom that your body will tell you what, when, and how it needs to eat. You know, and so that's done really by starting to learn how to listen to your own hunger. So instead of people telling you intermittent fast, you know, which is, let's say, a big one. And again, I'm not against any particular format if it works for you. So let's say you're looking with intermittent fasting, but then you're waking up and you're absolutely starving and you can't concentrate well on your work, and you're not doing, you know, you're in a mood, or you're feeling agitated. Then even if everyone else is telling you, oh, there's lots of evidence to support this and it works for this number of people, that might be true. It's fine. I've no problem with that. Does it work for you? If it doesn't work for you, then you can feel like trust yourself. No one has the permission to tell you what works well for you. It's like going to the toilet. That's the example that I have. You know, how do you know when you need to go? You just know. So it's about starting to listen to your hunger and fullness scales. You know, how do you know when you've had enough? I can go into a store and I might want Maltesers, and there are about 6 different package sizes that I could get. There's the fun size ones. Nothing fun about them. There's like 6 in that pack. There's the boxes that you can get, you know, the boxes of Maltesers. There's the big packets. There's the family size ones. There's the normal ones. So am I going to let, you know, whatever, I don't know, marketing agency decided that this should be the size of this serving size? Am I going to let that determine how many Maltesers I need? What if I finish a family size and I still want more? Or what if I just have the fun size and that's too much? You know, so it's about regaining that control, that not control, that ability to listen to yourself and to respond to it, so that you listen. When you're hungry, you eat. When you feel full, you stop eating. When you're satisfied, you stop eating. That you eat in a way that is really mindful. You really taste your food. You enjoy it. You know, I can work a Malteser for about 4 minutes, just letting it roll around, first smelling it, really like licking it. There's a whole, I do a whole exercise on this in the book and in workshops. You know, it's really, really taking your time to savor the taste. Sometimes one is all you need when you eat like that.
Yeah. But I think for a lot of people, especially people that have issues with eating, that a lot of their body, and you're talking a lot about the instincts of it, but a lot of people have lost that, haven't they? Because they're eating too much of the beige colour food. So it's sort of two-pronged, isn't it? As to how you start getting your body, allowing your body to listen to it, or allowing yourself to listen to your body.
Absolutely. And that's an excellent point. And that is definitely discussed in the book. And it really is about starting to wake up your hunger. So I never tell people clearly when they should eat. That never happens, except on one condition. If your hunger, a lot of the time people say exactly what you say. I can't even know if I'm hungry. I don't have that feeling. I've been restricting or not listening to myself for so long. And so what we do is a very, very simple practice of it takes maybe a week. With everyone that I've worked with, the longest I've ever gone is 1 week, where it's the only time I'll tell you to eat every 3 hours. Doesn't matter what you eat, you just do it to wake up the body. And what happens is by day, people are really reluctant to do it. By day 4, 5, something like that, depending, their hunger completely wakes up. They're really able to start to listen, to discern. Often there's then a lot of hunger coming up because the body hasn't been nourished properly previously, and so the body's starting to wake up with that. It's a calibration. You just take a bit of time and the body starts to calibrate, and then you can start to work with, well, what was I experiencing then, and you start to discern it. And so, when we look at a hunger scale, it's not just as simple as am I hungry or am I not. We look at all the different levels along the way. So what is the difference if 5 is neutral, I'm neither hungry nor full? What is the difference between a 4 and a 2? And what is the difference physically? What is it mentally? What is it emotionally? So for me, I know personally that I know when I'm hungry for food because my concentration starts to go. It's the first thing that happens before any physical sensations, before I know what I want to eat. I know I can be sitting, doing something, and bam, I can't focus in the same way, and I know that I'm hungry. Now, for you, that might be a level 1, or you might have great concentration and be able to keep going and going and going, and you only lose concentration after your stomach's already rumbling, or after you've already got a little bit ratty with someone. That might be, you have different signs. And so part of this is to start to uncover your own personal hunger and fullness awareness scale, so that you can discern and you start to realize, oh yeah, I know this, I've been here before. If I get to the point where I'm a little bit ratty with someone, I know I've gone too far, and that's fine. You just learn for next time. I don't want to get to that point, because that means that I'm a 1 or a 2 on my hunger awareness scale.
And then sort of moving on to, because we've spoken a lot about the internet, which I think does play a big part in people's lives. And when we hear the words body acceptance or body positivity, and I mean, I don't know if people muddle them up. I personally don't know what the definitions are. What does it mean? Is one good and one bad, or how does it work?
Yeah, and another excellent question. I think people do muddle them up, is my first part to that answer. I think, look, the body positivity movement have done a fantastic job of taking, people who maybe don't fit into a particular ideal or societal, defined ideal of beauty or attractiveness or whatever that might be. And they've reclaimed that, and they've said, this is nonsense. It's ridiculous that I have to fit into one category to be considered desirable. But bodies are all, can all be desirable. And, I really relish in my body and enjoy it and feel good about it. And that's a really, really positive move. And I would, if I'm meeting someone, I would much rather that they feel positively about their body than they hate themselves, or that they have low body image. That's definitely a good step in that direction. However, where it becomes tricky is that there is still an over-evaluation or an identification with the body, even when it's body positive, which means that you're still often depending your worth on the way that you look. Body acceptance is not about whether it's saying, my worth is not dependent on my body at all. It's not about big is beautiful, or my stretch marks are, warrior stripes, or whatever it is that how people try to reframe these things. It's really about, my body functions in a particular way. And I'm grateful for that, because it lets me live life the way that I hope to live life. And even if I don't love it, even if there are things about it that I want to change, or that I don't like about it, I can still accept it for what it is, even if I wish it were different. It's no different to, I wish that I had blue eyes. Okay, I can wish that I have blue eyes. It doesn't mean I start poking things into my green eyes. I still look after my eyes, and I treat them well. And so it's body acceptance is much more around, I'm going to nourish myself and treat myself well, regardless of how I'm feeling about my body, even if I don't love it, even if I can still wish that it would be different, but I'm still going to accept it for what it is and be grateful for the things that it does provide me, or it does enable me to do. Now, that being said, a lot of the body positive movements do incorporate that, but I think that there has been a little bit of toxicity that's that's sort of confused or muddled the body positivity movement. And that's really around this over-evaluation on, now big is beautiful and big should be the fashion. And it's sort of just trying to flip the scales, so to speak, no pun intended, but it's just trying to flip things over. And the other thing that happens, and it's rare, it is definitely rare, but the other thing that I have seen with some body positivity expressions is that it sort of doesn't take into consideration this idea of also saying no to certain things and knowing where to put a boundary in. That's definitely on the rare side, and I wouldn't want to say that that's quite common within body positivity movements, but I have seen that there are some expressions where it can be a little bit toxic of, I don't have any filters. It's sort of this excuse to just go on and binge eat and do whatever you want without being able to say no and putting in a boundary. Like I said, that's quite rare, but that is something to think about when you're exploring the sort of different aspects of body positivity versus acceptance.
But it's funny, isn't it? I think you may say that in practice you don't see in your practice you don't see that, but there's a lot of that is out there on the internet. I think one sees it. So and there is quite an aggressive form of it as well. But it's good that actually you don't see a lot of it in your practice.
I think I don't see a lot of it, because I think by the time if people are coming to see me, it's because they recognize that there's something that isn't right for them within, with how they're experiencing their body or how they're eating or their relationship with food or something else. And so they haven't quite been able to embrace the body positivity in the way that maybe it's seen online. So yes, when I was talking about the kind of the rarer end of the spectrum, it is obviously things that is seen in social media, and is portrayed in that particular light. But the reason I'm being cautious with overgeneralizing is because I don't want to devalue the good work that the body positivity movement has done, because I think it's much better to feel good about yourself than it is to hate your body and to treat it unkindly. I just think that both are extremes. And so my view, and a lot of people can't get to that place of body positivity of like, oh, I love everything about myself, no matter how I look. Most of my clients can't get there. I don't know if I could get there, actually, of always loving every aspect of myself. So, for me, it's much more around body acceptance, this very kind of middle way of, I accept my body for what it is. I will nourish it. I will take good care of it. I don't have to love it, but I do have to be kind to myself. And that, I think, is a really balanced way of sort of managing the kind of body image difficulties with the sort of body positivity extremes.
And I think also, the Talk Health community is all about working and supporting people with chronic health conditions. And for them, body acceptance, whether it be a skin issue or as they've got a physical issues that you may get from MS, it's so important to be able to embrace your body for the good things that it can do, and accept where you are in order to be able to move forward and manage the condition as well. So it's a tricky line, isn't it?
It is a tricky line, and it goes back to empowering the individual to trust their body, even in the throes of what we would say disease. I work with lots of people who, let's say, have diabetes or thyroid difficulties, and you can still mold this work around certain restrictions. So, if you have diabetes and you have to, let's say, restrict your sugar intake, my point is, well, if you're going to restrict, you're putting power on sugar, and then you're going to want to crave it more. So at the same time, you want to take care of your health. So explore, become a scientist. How much is enough for you? What is it like? Can you have 2 pieces of chocolate at the end of a meal, and does your body metabolize that differently? Is that okay within the realms of your diabetes? Or does your body respond to all forms of sugar in the same way? It's really about bringing the ownership back to yourself and asking yourself, let me see what happens. Because otherwise you restrict, and then you eat the one cookie and that's it. You've gone through the whole bag because it's got so much allure to it, because it's so powerful. You're not supposed, it's that naughty, indulgence that you're not supposed to have. So this is the opposite. It's with whatever health condition you have. Likewise, if you've got a thyroid problem, and maybe your body isn't the shape that you would like it to be, it's about, well, okay, but how can you still treat yourself? How can you still nourish yourself in a way that is loving and kind, even if your body isn't looking the way that you'd like it to look? It's about still owning that, and as you say, and working with what your body can do and being appreciative of that.
So just sort of last question I was going to say to wrap it up, but it actually doesn't, because it goes on to another thing. But because we are limited slightly in time, is looking at, the sort of, I know the next thing that you look at with your clients is, how do you use your relationship with food? How does that then move on as sort of a gateway to transform or support other areas of your life? And you've already alluded to something which we kind of forget. If we don't eat enough, we get really moody.
I mean, I have yet to meet someone that has a difficult relationship with food, and yet everything else in their life is perfect. It just doesn't happen that way, because for that exact reason. It's such a basic need. If you're not nourishing yourself well, you're not performing to your highest. Your emotions aren't at its highest. Your physical health isn't being taken care of. And it's even more subtle than that. When you don't nourish yourself, think about the message that you're sending. You're basically saying, I am not worthy enough to deserve food, to be fed correctly. And that, even very subconsciously, that is the underpinning then that plays out in other areas of your life. So when I talk about, how to use this as a gateway, all the work that you would have done, this is one of the last parts of the book. And so you would have done all this work on really understanding your habitual tendencies around food, around eating, how you respond to your body, learning how to change and work with those different things. And now you're looking, and you've got all this data, all this information, how you relate to food or to your body. And then you can start to see, well, hang on a minute, if I do this with food, if I'm completely chaotic with my eating, where else am I chaotic in my life? Or if I'm extremely controlled and rigid and everything has to be perfect, where else do I see perfectionism coming out in my life? And so that's the first way that it's a gateway. You start by just exploring one aspect. You're getting this valuable data to explore all these different areas of your life. But then it goes the step further, because as you start to transform it, you're reshifting your focus, and you're relearning, as I said before, you're relearning the way in which you relate to yourself. And so when you start to, let's say, put boundaries around what you eat, or boundaries around how other people talk to you about your body, let's say, you start to put boundaries elsewhere in your life. You're practicing it several times a day, right? We eat several times a day. So you have this opportunity to practice all the time. And then it starts to infuse it's very natural, very organically. It starts to infuse into other aspects of your life. So you now find it much easier to, let's say, put boundaries up at work, because you value yourself more, because you're nourishing yourself. You've got good at starting to respond to what you actually need. And you're honoring that. And so then you'll honor that in other aspects of your life. And so it's this beautiful method of taking food as just this one practice place, but without even realizing that by just changing this, because it's so constant and it's something that you have to do and think about every single day, several times a day, it then just naturally will start to seep into other areas of your life.
And I think what you've certainly made me aware is awareness. It's awareness, and then I can see that then there's empowerment that comes from that awareness.
That's it. You got it. And that's the thing, it's so it's so hard, and yet it's so simple at the same time. And that's really where the rub is, actually, because the conditions are strong, and the tendencies, and and we've just built up. I mean, even from the brain, we've just built up these neural pathways over and over and over again. And now you're trying to do something different, and that's what's challenging. But actually, the concept is very simple. Actually, it's just become aware of what you were doing in the past, realize that that doesn't serve you, and then train in doing something different. And I wish it was as easy as just that.
But your book, I think, absolutely goes a really good way to supporting and helping people to start going on that journey. So
Thank you.
thank you very much, Romi. It's been a pleasure
Thank
to meet
you.
you. Thank you.
Likewise. Thank you.